In a big house full of shining lights and soft music, lived a little girl named Mira. She was 8 years old and the only daughter of Mrs. Kiran, a rich and important woman. Mira's world was full of expensive toys, beautiful dresses, and bright rooms. But something was wrong. Mira had not smiled or spoken for many months. She sat quietly by the window every day, looking outside but never really seeing anything. Her mother, Mrs. Kiran, was worried. Mira was once a happy child. She used to laugh and play all day long. But now, her eyes were empty and her face was still. No one could understand why Mira had stopped talking. No one could bring back the joy that once filled her heart. Mrs. Kiran did everything she could think of to help her daughter. She called the best doctors from many places. 20 doctors came to the house to examine Mira. They were brain doctors, child doctors, and even doctors who studied feelings. Each one tried to find the reason why Mira was silent. They checked her body and her mind, but none of them could find the answer. The doctors gave Mrs. Kiran many ideas. Some said Mira was very sad. Others thought she might be scared or angry. Some thought she had a problem inside her brain. But no medicine, no therapy, and no special treatment helped. The big house became a quiet place. The sounds of laughter and happy voices disappeared. The only noise was the soft footsteps of the nurses and the whispers of the staff. People began to talk quietly about the silent heiress, the rich little girl who would not speak. Outside the windows, the garden was full of colorful flowers and green trees. Birds sang their songs, but inside the house, there was only silence. Deep down in the house, away from the bright lights and fancy rooms, was the basement. Here, the floors were cold and the walls were plain. The cleaning supplies were kept in a small room, and the janitor's cart waited quietly in the corner. Ravi, the janitor, worked here every day. He was a man in his early 30s, with kind eyes and a gentle smile. He wore simple clothes and always carried his cleaning tools with care. Ravi was a single father. His daughter, Anu, was 9 years old and lived with him in a small home far from the big mansion. Ravi had not come to the house looking for answers. He was just doing his job, sweeping floors, cleaning windows, and fixing small problems that no one else wanted to see. But one morning, something caught his attention. He was pushing his cart past Mira's playroom. The door was open just a little, and he saw Mira sitting inside. She was small and quiet, sitting on the floor with a broken toy piano in front of her. The piano was old and dusty. Some keys were missing, and the wood was cracked. Mira's hands were on the piano, but she was not playing. She just looked at it, her eyes calm and empty. Ravi stopped. He watched her for a moment. There was something different in the way Mira held her hand. It was a small thing, a tiny movement of her fingers, but it made him curious. He remembered his daughter, Anu. When she was scared, she would hold her hands in the same way. It was a small sign that she wanted help but could not ask for it. Ravi quietly moved away, not wanting to scare Mira. He went back to his work, but his mind did not stop thinking about the girl and her broken piano. That night, after finishing his work, Ravi sat in his small room. He thought about Mira. He thought about his own daughter and how hard it was to understand a child's silence. The next day, Ravi decided to try something. He went back to the playroom and carefully picked up the broken toy piano. He took it to the basement and started fixing it slowly. He cleaned the keys, put the broken pieces back together, and made sure the piano could play some notes again. When he finished, he placed the piano back in the playroom by the window where the sunlight could shine on it. Then he waited. Mira came into the room as usual. She sat down by the piano and looked at it. For the first time in many months, her fingers moved. She pressed two keys, one after the other. C and D. Ravi smiled softly. It was a small sound, a small sign, but it was the start of something new. For the first time, the silent heiress had shown a sign of life. And Ravi knew this was only the beginning. Ravi wiped the sweat from his forehead as the late afternoon sun shone through the windows of the mansion. The big house looked beautiful with the golden light falling on its marble floors and tall curtains. But to Ravi, the mansion was more than just a fancy building. It was a place full of secrets that only a few people noticed. He was just the janitor. The man who cleaned the floors and emptied the trash. No one paid much attention to him. People hurried past, talking to doctors and nurses, ignoring the man who moved quietly through the halls. But Ravi had a story of his own. Once, he had been a schoolteacher. He loved teaching children and watching them grow. He used to tell stories, help with homework, and listen carefully when a child wanted to talk. But life changed suddenly. His wife fell very sick and passed away. Ravi was left alone with his little daughter, Anu. Taking care of Anu was the most important job in the world for him. But the bills were many, and the money was little. He could not find a good job as a teacher. So, he took what he could find to provide for Anu. The janitor's job at the mansion was the best he could get. Ravi worked hard. Every morning, he woke up early to clean the floors before anyone came to the house. Every night, he went home to Anu, who waited for him with a smile. Anu was his world. Even though she was only 9, Anu was brave. She liked to read books and draw pictures. Sometimes, she told her father stories she made up. Those moments made Ravi feel strong. But Ravi could never forget the sadness in Mira's eyes. After fixing the toy piano, he saw something new in Mira. She was still quiet, but there was a small change. The way her fingers moved over the keys showed a small hope, a small wish to speak again. One afternoon, after his work was done, Ravi went to see Anu. "Anu," he said softly, "do you remember when you were scared to draw at school? You held your crayon very tightly." Anu nodded. "Yes, Papa. I was afraid my drawing would be wrong." Ravi smiled and said, "Mira, the little girl in the mansion, holds her hands in a way that reminds me of you when you were scared. She is trying to tell us something with her fingers." Anu looked thoughtful. Maybe she is afraid. Maybe she wants someone to help her, but she cannot say it. Ravi felt a deep feeling in his heart. He knew Mira needed more than doctors. She needed someone who could listen without words. The next day, Ravi decided to talk to someone who might know more about Mira. He asked the head maid, a kind woman named Radha, "Do you know anyone who was very close to Mira before she stopped speaking?" Radha thought for a moment and said, "Yes, there was Suma Aunty, the old nanny. She cared for Mira for many years. But she left suddenly, about a month before Mira stopped talking." Ravi's eyes grew curious. "Why did she leave?" Radha looked around nervously and said softly, "There was an accident, a fire in the guest house. No one talks about it openly. But Suma said something about Mira being scared after that." Ravi thanked Radha and decided to find Suma. The next day, after finishing his cleaning, Ravi took a bus to a small village outside the city. It was a quiet place with green fields and simple houses. He found Suma's small home. The old woman opened the door slowly. When she saw Ravi, her eyes filled with tears. "You have come for Mira," she asked softly. Yes, Auntie, Ravi replied. I want to help her. Suma invited him inside. She told him stories about Mira, the laughter, the games, and the days before the silence. She saw something terrible that day, Suma said, her voice trembling. Something that scared her more than anything. Ravi listened carefully as Suma explained about the fire. It was no accident. Someone wanted to hide the truth. But Mira saw everything. She cannot say it yet. Her heart is full of fear. Ravi's mind raced. He thought about the man in the grey coat who often visited the mansion. He remembered hearing whispers about him but never paid attention. Now, everything seemed connected: the silence, the fire, and the little girl's broken piano. When Ravi returned to the mansion, he felt a new strength. He wanted to help Mira find her voice. He wanted to show her that she was not alone. That evening, he took the toy piano and sat quietly near the window. Mira came in, her eyes meeting his for a brief moment. She pressed two keys again, C and D. Ravi smiled gently. Little steps, he whispered. Mira's tiny fingers trembled, but she did not pull away. Ravi knew this was the first sign of hope. Back in his small home, Ravi hugged Anu tightly. We will find a way, he promised. Because sometimes, the smallest clues are the most important. And sometimes, the quietest hearts hold the strongest courage. The days passed slowly in the mansion, but for Ravi, each day brought a little more hope. Every time he cleaned the floors near the playroom, he stopped and looked at Mira. She was still silent and still, but the small movement of her fingers on the piano keys stayed in his mind. One afternoon, Ravi sat quietly in the corner of the playroom, pretending to fix a broken window pane. Mira was sitting on the floor, her eyes fixed on the old toy piano. The keys glowed softly in the sunlight coming through the window. Ravi noticed something new. Each time Mira pressed the keys, she always hit two notes, the same two notes again and again. It was not a song, not a tune. It was a pattern. C and D, C and D. Ravi's heart beat faster. This was not random. He remembered the way Anu, his daughter, used to hold her hands when she was scared to speak. Sometimes, when children feel trapped by fear or pain, they try to tell their story in little ways, without words. Ravi thought hard. What was Mira trying to say with those two notes? Later that day, Ravi asked Anu on a video call, Anu, do you remember when you were scared and held your crayon tightly? What did you do to feel better? Anu smiled shyly. I drew pictures, Papa. Pictures of happy things. Sometimes, I made up secret signs with my drawings. Like, if I wanted someone to know I was scared, I would draw two lines close together. Ravi nodded. What if Mira is trying to tell us something with her two notes on the piano? Anu thought for a moment. Maybe she wants someone to understand her story. But she doesn't have words. Ravi felt a new determination. He decided to learn more about Mira's past, about the moments before the silence. He wanted to find the truth hidden behind those two notes. The next morning, Ravi visited the library of the mansion. The room was large, filled with tall shelves and old books. He hoped to find something about Mira's life, or the fire that Suma Auntie had mentioned. As he flipped through a dusty photo album, he found pictures of Mira playing with her nanny, Suma. They laughed, hugged, and looked happy. In one photo, Mira held a small toy piano that looked just like the one in the playroom. Ravi smiled softly. That piano must have meant a lot to her. But then, he found a letter slipped between the pages. It was from Suma, written to Mrs. Kiran before she left the mansion. The letter spoke of a dark secret. It warned of a man who was not kind to Mira. Someone who had caused the fire in the guest house. Someone who wanted to keep the truth hidden. Ravi's hands shook as he read the words. He knew he had to act. That afternoon, Ravi returned to the playroom. Mira sat by the window, her eyes staring outside again. Ravi gently placed the toy piano on her lap. "Play for me," he whispered. Mira's small fingers moved slowly over the keys. C and D, C and D. Then, suddenly, her eyes filled with tears. She looked up at Ravi, but did not speak. Ravi sat beside her, not saying a word. He understood that Mira's silence was a shield. A way to protect herself from pain too deep to explain. Slowly, over the next days, Ravi spent more time with Mira. He brought books and soft toys. He told her stories without words. He played the piano, pressing the same two notes, making a gentle melody. One evening, as the sun set behind the tall trees, Mira did something unexpected. She reached out her tiny hand and touched Ravi's face. It was the first touch in many months. Ravi's heart filled with warmth. He smiled softly and held her hand gently. In that moment, he understood Mira was beginning to trust him. He whispered, "You are not alone, little one." That night, Ravi sat in his small room and thought about the next step. He needed to find Suma Aunty again. She was the only one who might know how to help Mira heal. He also thought about the man in the grey coat, the one who visited the mansion often but left suddenly after the fire. Who was he? What was his secret? Ravi knew that to help Mira, he had to uncover the truth. Because sometimes, the smallest clues like two notes on a piano or a quiet touch can lead to the biggest answers. And sometimes, healing begins with a single act of kindness. The mansion was quiet that morning, with sunlight streaming softly through the tall windows. Mira sat near the window in her usual spot, her small hands resting on the old toy piano that Ravi had fixed. Ravi watched from a distance, quietly holding his cleaning tools. He knew Mira was not ready to speak yet, but something in her eyes told him she was trying. For days, she had pressed the same two piano keys, C and D. No one else had noticed the pattern, but Ravi had. He believed those two notes held a message. A message from Mira's heart. Ravi decided to be patient. He gently played the two notes on the piano, again and again, hoping Mira would understand that he was listening. After a while, Mira reached out and pressed the keys beside the C and D, the notes E and F. It was a small change. But it meant something. Ravi smiled softly. Maybe Mira was ready to say a little more. That afternoon, Ravi sat with Mira and showed her a notebook and a pencil. He didn't ask her to write or speak. Instead, he drew a small picture, a sun shining above a house. Mira's eyes followed his hand. Then, slowly, she picked up the pencil. With shaky fingers, she drew two lines, simple, but clear. Ravi's heart skipped a beat. He looked closely and saw the lines were just like the two notes she played on the piano. Mira was trying to speak in her own way. The next few days were filled with small steps. Mira began to play more notes on the piano. She drew pictures in her notebook. And sometimes, when she felt safe, she looked at Ravi and smiled just a little, but it was a smile. Ravi shared what he saw with Anu during their video calls. Anu cheered softly, "Papa, she is telling her story. She wants someone to listen." Ravi knew this was just the beginning. Mira was trying to tell him about something she had hidden deep inside. One evening, As the sun set and the sky turned orange, Ravi saw Mira pick up a small keychain from the table. It was shaped like a little grey coat. She held it tightly, then looked at Ravi with eyes full of fear and sadness. Ravi's mind went back to the stories from Suma Auntie and the fire in the guest house. The man in the grey coat. The secret that scared Mira. Ravi took a deep breath. He knew he had to find the courage to face the secret. The next day, Ravi met Mrs. Kiran in her large office. She looked tired but hopeful. "Mrs. Kiran," Ravi said softly, "Mira is trying to tell us something. She is scared. The fire, the man in the grey coat. I think they are connected." Mrs. Kiran's eyes widened. She nodded slowly. "There are things I have not told anyone. Things I hoped would stay hidden." Ravi looked at her carefully. "We cannot hide from the truth. Not if we want to help Mira heal." Mrs. Kiran sighed deeply and said, "You are right. I will do what it takes." With her support, Ravi reached out to Suma Auntie again. Together, they planned to help Mira find the words she could not say. Meanwhile, Ravi kept spending time with Mira. He sang soft songs, played the piano, and sat quietly with her. One afternoon, Mira pressed the key C and D again, but this time, she held Ravi's hand tightly. It was a small moment. But for Ravi, it was everything. In the silence, there was hope. In the quiet, there was trust. And in the heart of the silent Heiress, a new song was beginning to play. Days turned into weeks, and little by little, Mira began to change. The silence around her grew lighter, like the morning sun breaking through the dark clouds. Ravi watched her closely every day. He cleaned the mansion's floors, but his eyes were always on Mira. He noticed the small signs: a gentle touch, a soft gaze, the way her fingers moved over the piano keys. One afternoon, as Ravi was mopping the hallway near the playroom, Mira came out quietly, holding her little notebook. She walked slowly toward him. Ravi stopped and looked up. Mira's eyes met his for the first time without fear. She handed him the notebook. Ravi opened it carefully. Inside, there were simple drawings: pictures of a big house, a garden, and a small girl standing alone under a tree. The drawings told a story of loneliness, but also hope. Ravi smiled softly. "Thank you, Mira," he said gently. That evening, Ravi sat with Mrs. Kiran and showed her the drawings. Mrs. Kiran's eyes filled with tears. "She is trying to tell us how she feels," Mrs. Kiran said quietly. "All this time, she was trapped inside her own heart." Ravi nodded. "We must help her open that door." The very next day, Ravi went to meet Suma Auntie again. The old woman was waiting in her small house, ready to help. Suma had brought a small box filled with things that belonged to Mira when she was younger: toys, pictures, and a small diary. Ravi and Suma took the box to the mansion. They placed it in the playroom, where Mira could see it. When Mira came in, her eyes grew wide. She reached out and touched the diary. Slowly, with Ravi and Suma by her side, Mira began to turn the pages. The diary was filled with simple words and drawings from happier days. It spoke of laughter, sunshine, and friendship. But there were also pages with scribbles and dark shapes: signs of fear and sadness. Ravi realized that Mira had tried to tell her story in the diary, but no one had read it. Now, it was time. With great care, Ravi and Suma helped Mira to tell her story. They used the diary, the drawings, and the piano. Each small note, each word, was a step toward healing. One afternoon, while sitting with Mira, Ravi noticed something. She was holding a small key the same shape as the grey coat keychain she had shown before. Ravi asked gently, "Mira, do you remember the man in the grey coat?" Mira's eyes filled with tears. She nodded slowly. Ravi squeezed her hand and whispered, "You are safe now. No one will hurt you." Mira's small voice finally came out. It was weak and soft, but it was there. "I scared," she said. Ravi smiled through his own tears. "I know, little one. But you are brave." The words were simple, but for Mira, they meant the world. Ravi shared this moment with Mrs. Kiran and Suma. They knew the road ahead was still long, but the door was opening. Mira's heart was beginning to heal. That night, as Ravi returned to his small home, he held Anu tightly. "She is beginning to speak," he told her softly. "The little girl in the mansion is finding her voice." Anu smiled, "Papa, you are a hero." Ravi laughed quietly. "No, Anu. We all are heroes when we help someone find hope." In the quiet of the night, Ravi knew one thing for sure: sometimes, the smallest hands can hold the biggest courage. And sometimes, a broken heart can learn to sing again. The mansion was quieter these days, but inside, a gentle light was growing. Mira's small voice was coming out more often, her eyes shining with a new kind of hope. The silence that had held her for so long was slowly breaking. Ravi watched her carefully. He knew the healing was not easy. Every step forward had its own challenge. But he believed in Mira's strength and in the power of kindness. One morning, Ravi found Mira sitting near the window, holding her small diary. She looked at him and softly said, "Papa Ravi, story." Ravi smiled and nodded. "Yes, Mira. Your story." Together, they opened the diary. Mira pointed to the pages with the dark scribbles. She touched the pictures of the fire in the guest house. Her small voice trembled as she said, "Fire, scared." Ravi held her hand tightly. "It's okay to be scared," he said gently. "But we will find out the truth." That day, Ravi spoke to Mrs. Kiran. She was tired but ready. "Ravi," she said quietly, "it is time. The truth must come out." With Mrs. Kiran's support, Ravi arranged a meeting with the hospital doctors and a counselor who specialized in helping children. At the meeting, Ravi told what he had learned from Suma Aunty, from the diary, and from Mira's small signs. The doctors listened carefully. One doctor, Dr. Sharma, looked serious. "If Mira saw something that scared her, we need to protect her. And we need to understand what happened." Mrs. Kiran nodded. "The fire was no accident. It was caused by someone trying to hide a secret." Ravi felt a chill. The man in the grey coat, the visitor who left after the fire, was the key. The next day, Mrs. Kiran spoke to the police. She shared what Suma Aunty and Ravi had told her. The police began a quiet investigation. Meanwhile, Ravi stayed close to Mira. He helped her play the piano. Together, they made new songs about sunshine and hope, about safety and love. One afternoon, Mira surprised Ravi. She pressed the piano keys and said clearly, "Safe now." Ravi's eyes filled with tears. "Yes, Mira. You are safe." But Ravi knew the hardest part was still ahead, helping Mira face her fear. One evening, Suma Aunty sat beside Mira. She gently asked, "Mira, do you remember the man in the grey coat?" Mira nodded slowly. "Scared, bad man." Suma smiled softly and said, "He can't hurt you anymore. We will keep you safe." That night, Mira finally told a small story. She spoke about the fire, the noise, and how she hid under the bed. She told how the man tried to stop her from telling anyone. Ravi and Mrs. Kiran listened, holding her hands, comforting her. The days passed. The police found evidence and arrested the man in the grey coat. The secret was out. With the truth shining in the light, Mira's fear began to fade. She started to laugh softly again. She spoke a few words more each day. Her eyes no longer held the empty sadness, but a spark of joy. Ravi watched Mira's journey with pride. He thought about his own daughter, Anu, and how important it was to listen to the small signs. One evening, as the sun set over the garden, Mira played a new melody on the piano, a song of hope and courage. Ravi sat beside her and said, "You are very brave, Mira." She looked up and smiled, "Thank you, Papa Ravi." The mansion, once full of silence and sadness, was now filled with music and light. And Ravi knew, deep in his heart, that sometimes, the smallest clues like two notes on a piano can change a life forever. The mansion was no longer a place of sadness. It had changed, just like Mira had changed. The silence that once filled the halls was replaced by laughter, soft conversations, and music from the little piano. Ravi felt proud every time he saw Mira smile. She was no longer the quiet girl who only pressed two notes. She was growing stronger, slowly finding her voice and her courage. One morning, Ravi was cleaning near the playroom when Mira walked up to him. In her hand, she held a small drawing, a picture of a sun shining brightly over the mansion. She looked at Ravi and said, "Thank you, Papa Ravi." Ravi's heart filled with warmth. "You are very welcome, Mira." He knew the journey had not been easy. Many days were filled with tears and silence, but now, hope was shining bright. Mira had started going to a special school nearby. There, she learned to speak more and make friends. She loved music and painting, and her laughter could be heard in the gardens. Mrs. Kiran, who had once been worried and tired, now smiled often. She thanked Ravi for never giving up on Mira. "You saw what no one else could see," she said. "You gave her hope." Ravi smiled softly. Sometimes, all a child needs is someone to listen. One evening, Ravi returned home to find Anu waiting eagerly. "Papa, how is Mira today?" she asked. Ravi hugged her tightly. "She is happy, Anu. She is finally free." Anu smiled brightly. "I knew she would be." That night, Ravi sat by the window, thinking about everything that had happened. From the moment he saw Mira's tiny hands on the piano keys to the day she said her first words, it had been a journey of patience, courage, and love. He thought about the man in the grey coat, the darkness that had tried to break Mira's spirit. But he also thought about the light, the kindness of Suma Ande, the care of Mrs. Kiran, the help of the doctors, and the strength inside Mira herself. Ravi understood something very important: sometimes, the greatest heroes are not the rich or powerful, but the ones who believe in the quietest voices. The next day, the mansion held a small celebration. Mira's friends from school came to visit. There were balloons, music, and laughter. Mira played the piano, this time with a full melody. She looked at Ravi and smiled wide. Ravi felt tears in his eyes. He thought about his own daughter, Anu, and how lucky he was to have her by his side. He realized that love and hope could heal even the deepest wounds. As the sun set, painting the sky with colors of orange and pink, Ravi knew this was a new beginning for Mira, for the mansion, and for everyone who believed in the power of a single tiny clue. The story of the silent heiress who found her voice was now a story of courage and light. and Ravi, the single dad janitor, had been the one to see it all along.